And shortly after the US test fired an intercontinental ballistic missile, Russian President Vladimir Putin has ordered his top officials to prepare for possible nuclear tests.
Now, on Wednesday, the US Air Force launched the Minuteman III continental ballistic missile from Vandenberg Space Force Base in California, part of America's so-called nuclear triad. The missile can be launched from land-based silos, submarines or bombers and serves as one leg of the US nuclear deterrent. According to officials, the unarmed missile traveled thousands of miles before landing near the Army's Ronald Reagan ballistic missile defense test site in the Marshall Islands. They described the test as successful and routine.
Now, this comes less than a week after President Trump directed the Pentagon to start testing nuclear weapons on an equal basis with Russia and China, quote unquote. Following the test firing of this missile, Putin convened a meeting of Russia's Security Council, saying his government would also consider resuming nuclear tests if the US does so.
Russia has always strictly adhered to its obligations under Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, and we have no plans to withdraw from them. At the same time, as I stated in my address to the Federal Assembly in 2023, should the United States or other treaty signatories conduct such tests, Russia would be compelled to take appropriate reciprocal measures.
Well, Putin has ordered his defense and foreign ministers to gather information and draft proposals for the possible test preparations, potentially at the Arctic test site of Novaya Zemlya. Russia has not conducted a nuclear test since 1990, the final year of the Soviet Union.
I am instructing the Foreign Ministry, the Ministry of Defense, the Special Services, and the relevant civilian agencies to do everything necessary to collect additional information on this issue, analyze it within the framework of the Security Council, and make agreed proposals on the possible start of work on the preparations for nuclear weapons testing.
During the meeting, Secretary of the Security Council Sergei Shoigu said that the US is planning underground nuclear tests, while Defense Minister Andrei Belousov told Putin that US stance made it advisable to prepare for full-scale nuclear tests immediately, quote unquote.
Now, for more on this, we're being joined live by Peter Kuznick from Washington. He's a professor of history and director of the Nuclear Studies Institute at the American University. Thank you so much, Professor Kuznick, for joining us on the broadcast.
Glad to be with you.
Professor, we know that the U.S. has just test launched what's being described as the Doomsday ballistic missile, and this is just days after President Donald Trump had vowed to restart nuclear testing, and this is after a 30-year pause, we know. Now, what message is Washington trying to send here?
This is a long-planned nuclear test. It's not a nuclear test, it's a missile test. Under the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, all sides are allowed to test delivery systems. This is a test of a delivery system. It is not a nuclear weapons test. What Trump threatened recently was that the U.S. would begin nuclear weapons tests. But Secretary of Energy Chris Wright walked that back and said, we're not talking about nuclear weapons tests. Trump made a series of false statements when he announced that. So nobody knows what he's really talking about. And the assumption is that Trump doesn't know what he's talking about. He said the U.S. has the biggest arsenal. The U.S. doesn't have the biggest nuclear arsenal. He said that the U.S. would be conducting the same nuclear tests that China and India are conducting. Well, those are not nuclear weapons tests. I mean, the level of ignorance there is a little frightening, given the fact that this man has access to the nuclear codes and has the power to end life on the planet. You would rather see, you don't want to see anybody having that much power, but you'd much rather see it in the hands of somebody who's stable, rational, not impulsive, and not easily triggered.
Professor Kuznick, let me just first of all clarify that Trump mentioned Pakistan's name. He said China, Pakistan, North Korea and Russia were carrying out these nuclear tests in secret. He didn't mention India there. But the fact is that Trump is saying that he wants to carry out nuclear tests on an equal basis, just like China and Russia. Russia is saying that if US does it, we're going to do it too. They're both kind of saying the same thing, pointing at each other. Are we looking at a chicken and egg story when it comes to nuclear tests? Is that where we are, undermining decades of non-proliferation?
Well, again, what Trump says makes no sense. Russia has not tested a nuclear weapon since 1990. China has not tested a nuclear weapon since 1996. India tested in 1998. The only country that's tested in the 21st century is North Korea in 2017. But Putin has always made clear that if the United States begins nuclear testing again of nuclear weapons, then Russia will be forced to follow suit. And at that Russia Security Council meeting today, Secretary of Defense Belousov and General Gerasimov brought up that Russia should begin preparing for tests in case the United States begins testing also. And Putin agreed with the necessity to do so. But again, Trump said we're going to begin testing immediately. He, again, doesn't know what he's talking about. It would probably take 2 years if the United States works at breakneck pace to get the nuclear test site in Nevada ready to begin testing again. So there's no country is ready to test immediately. The quickest would probably be North Korea. The United States does not need to test it. The United States, through its stockpile stewardship program, through using supercomputers, lasers, X-rays, knows exactly how its nuclear weapons will respond. The countries that will benefit the most are countries like China. During the Cold War, the U.S. conducted 1,047 nuclear tests, 1,047. China conducted under 50 nuclear weapons tests. India has in total conducted only 3. So it's the countries that didn't do enormous amounts of testing, like the United States did, that would gain the best advantage. So this is not even in the United States' interest. Plus, it would probably trigger nuclear proliferation. Several countries already are on the verge of beginning a nuclear weapons program and would want to start testing as well. 72% of the public in South Korea has said they want South Korea to have its own nuclear weapons. Zelensky says he wants Ukraine to have nuclear weapons. This, again, is madness. So Trump, if he begins this nuclear anarchy, then we're all in very, very deep trouble.
Nuclear anarchy, as you mentioned. And Professor Kuznick, thanks so much for joining us here. You shed a lot of light on what has happened in the last 30 years. And as far as any test is concerned, what it would mean for US and perhaps other countries who also have their own nuclear arsenal. Thanks so much for joining us here on World DNA. There will be more to discuss as it's Trump and the comments keep coming in. Would love to have you on the show again.
Thanks for having me.